Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well, I'm assuming you're familiar with latest developments in Ukraine. One Russian massive, there's two of them, massive offensive and massive missile attack that occurred yesterday and last night. Yesterday, the big offensive, Russian offensive, started in the east of Ukraine, and last night Russia launched about 106 or more missiles. They launched more than 35 missiles from S-300 batteries, and then 71 out of 8 Tupolev 95 long-range bombers, and from 3 vessels in the warships in the Black Sea. So that's a massive attack. Infantry. The other one is missile attack. During this, it seems like the Ukrainians, at least according to Russians, would like to retaliate, and they will retaliate by trying to use, according to the Russians, using British long-range missile systems that they will receive, or they received already, to hit Crimea. Now that's a bad move, but bad move not because they're not they should, how do I put it nicely? I think they're entitled to hit back whomever attacks them. Let's put it this way: as long as there's military targets. If they hit civilian targets, you can't argue then hey, we did it because the Russians did it. Because if they did something wrong and you say that's wrong, you don't return it with something again wrong. Because if you did it that way, you're not different whatsoever, and you don't have the the upper hand, not the upper hand, but the moral the moral standard to say, well, I'm a good person, but I did the same thing to you because you did it to me first. Is bad or is good? That's what it is. Anyway, so let's see what the Ukrainians plan to do according to the Russians. This article comes from Sputnik, and it is from today, the 10th of February 2023. Ukrainian forces reportedly prepared to use UK's long-range missiles to hit Crimea. Now, the Ukrainian military is prepared to use the United Kingdom's long-range missiles to hit Crimea if these are provided in military aid, a British newspaper reported, citing Ukrainian defense sources. I don't see anything wrong doing that, because you've been doing this too. You attacked military positions in Ukraine, and according to the Ukrainians, even civilian positions. So I think it's not unfair to say that Ukraine should be allowed to hit back at, as they see it, the aggressor country, as long as they hit military positions. If they hit civilian positions, then you don't have any more. How should I put it? You can't point fingers anymore. I mean, if you point fingers, that makes you a hypocrite. I don't think they have a problem with this kind of terms anyway, or being called that way. On Wednesday, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky, during a speech in UK Parliament, asked the country to supply fighter jets to Kiev. UK Prime Minister Rishi Maharishi Sunak also said he had spoken with Zelensky on Wednesday, among other things, about providing Ukraine with longer range weapons that Kiev currently had. Ukrainian defense source confirmed that the newspaper that Kiev would use missiles to strike Crimea, following a warning from Zelensky that longer-range weapons from Western allies would strike, and I'm quoting, deep in the occupied territories. According to the report, discussions are taking place on whether London's further military aid to Kiev should include Harpoon anti-ship missiles and Storm Shadow surface-to-air missiles. Harpoon missiles have a range of up to 150 miles, so that's 200 kilometers, and Storm Shadow missiles can strike targets at a distance of up to 350 miles. Don't worry, they will get everything they need. Let's see what else. Russia launched, now they tell us what they did. Alright, it says here the Western nations have imposed numerous sanctions on Russia and have been supplying weapons to Ukraine. Vladimir Sergei Lavrov said any cargo that contains weaponry for Ukraine will will become a legitimate target for Russia. Okay, let's go back to this thing. This is important right here. First, when this is reported by the Russians that Zelensky said the West he will use the longer range weapons from Western allies deep in the occupied territories. That means you Russians agree that Crimea is an occupied territory. I shouldn't have done that. I should have said that that's not occupied, it's Russian territory. But according to the Ukrainians, yes, they could refer, and they are referring to Crimea as occupied, temporarily occupied territory. Now, regarding the Harpoon, you know that the Americans will provide, they already decided to provide those little missile slash bombs, longer range missile bombs. I can't remember the name of them. It's like Bagu Boom, Beba Bambi, Bebim. Anyway, they are A-OK, ready to be sent in the last military aid package that Americans were asked about, and they all said, yes, let's do it. Yeah, you know who made the decision without asking. Poor us. And they those missiles, I will call them bombs, missiles, because that's how they're called, because it's a combination between missiles and some bombs. It's something like this, guided bombs, something like that. They have a range of up to 150 kilometers. What the Ukrainians allegedly have now provided by the Western countries is up to 80 kilometers. From the 80 is going to go to 150 with the Americans' help. Now, Ukrainians have those 1970s Soviet drones with jet-propelled engine that can fly up to 1,000 kilometers. The ones they used to hit deep inside Russia, the Engels 2 airfield, military airfield, where the Russians kept their white swans and all those long-range bombardiers. And one was sent 2 days ago, on the 6th, I think it was sent towards Moscow, but it hit some trees 150 kilometers short of reaching Moscow. I think that was the goal. I mean, if you look on the map, it was straight going that way. And Ukrainians said they will, the Russians could expect receiving this kind of packages over there. Now, regarding the Harpoon thing, so the Americans gave to 150 kilometers. Now these guys here, the Brits, say no. We're gonna send Harpoon missiles with a range of up to 150 miles, which will extend it probably with 220 kilometers, 2020. So they go what 70 over 150, and then we have the other ones, the Storm Shadow, stormy waters. Yeah, okay, Shadow missiles that can strike targets at up to 350 miles. Which again is about 450 kilometers. I'm not worried that the Ukrainians will receive whatever they ask, because it's not about receiving. My assessment of this is, you guys, we work through you. They, the Western countries, repair the Ukrainian military infrastructure, tanks or whatever they need. They provide weapons. They provide intelligence. They don't provide troops, but everything else they provide. No nuclear weapons. That's not going to happen. They asked about submarines. I don't think they will receive any submarines. They require real, how do you call them, warships for the Black Sea. They will not receive that. They received like 15 boats for the Dnieper River, the short boats and so on, little boats, not the rowboats or the canoes or kayaks, but something like that. I'm pretty sure they're good. I saw pictures and they're okay to me. But they will receive everything, and it's not receive. It's actually this guy's fighting those guys with, as I make this analogy, you're like a tiger tamer or a lion tamer, a circus tamer. When you work with lions or tigers in a cage, the tamer, the trainer, he uses two things usually: the pole, long pole, and long whip. And he uses on the tiger, and the tiger is fighting the pole and the whip. But actually, who's actually fighting and hitting the tiger is right here. So the same Western countries, Ukraine, Russia. That's my analogy of what's going on over here. And when the tiger is going to break sometimes the whip and the pole, what's going to see? They already know what's going on, but it's kind of like an understanding. Well, we're not going to attack you because it's going to be the end of the whole shit. So we're just going to poke, see who's going to break the whole standoff. It's not a standoff, but it's an active war. But anyway, you know what it is. So in this case, yes, I don't see any reasons why the Ukrainians would not hit those guys, including inside Russia. Again, I think that's a legitimate target, military target, because you hit our country, why shouldn't I hit your country? Not only those territories that you occupied. And remember what the Russians said. The longer the missiles range you guys send to Ukraine, the further we have to push the Ukrainians westward from the borders that we're gonna set on the occupied territories. So after Ukraine, Russia gets, Kharkiv, Zaporozhia, then you got Donbass, you got all those, and you get to wherever they decide. From there, they would go westward to this buffer zone. We create a buffer zone depending on what missile range the Ukrainians have. Ukrainians have 150, the buffer zone will be 150 from the border. If it's going to be 450 kilometers, the Russians will try to push them 450. It's going to be 1,000, they push them to Ukraine, to Poland. If it's going to be 3,000, they go to the Atlantic. That's what Lavrov said. Not like how I say, but he said, the more, the further we push them. So it's up to you guys what to decide, because they can't afford, according to the Russians, to have the Ukrainians being still at war in case they're not, don't want a peace, don't want to sign anything, like the Russians don't want to sign anything as of now. They don't want to be hit with this guy, by these guys who's missiles, obviously. So, send them over, Red Rover, and then the Russians will do what they do best, return the favor. Unfortunately, thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.